Assalamualaikum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, our respected speaker, Professor Tamuli. I once again welcome you yet to another session of the 6-day faculty development program. So,
Thank you.
without much, sir, just give me a moment. I will turn off one of the system which is screening here so that it doesn't give me the. Yeah. So today we have Professor Tamuli with us. Indeed, I'm honored and I'm privileged to introduce Professor Tamuli, who is a retired professor and the head of the Department of Linguistics, Guwahati University, and he retired in 2022. So he did his doctoral research on lexical semantics at the University of Reading as a Commonwealth postdoctoral. Um, he is also a Commonwealth postdoctoral fellow at Lancaster University, where he worked on a scheme of parts of speech tagging for SMEs in 2009 to 10. So Professor Tamuli's teaching and research interests includes SMEs grammar, lexicography, early literacy, and multilingual education. In the recent years, Professor Tamuli has been advocating for greater recognition of the prominent role of language in education, especially in the context of literacy across the curriculum. So, we once again, on behalf of the Department of Language, Culture and Society, along with the Department of Linguistics, Teto College, Sovima, we welcome you to today's session. We are indeed honored to have you here with us, sir. The platform is yours.
Thank you, Yansupini. Um, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay. I'd like to share my presentation.
Okay, sir, sure.
Uh, Give me a second. Okay, I have it open. Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
All right. Thank you. Um, a very good afternoon to everyone present. It's indeed a pleasure to be with you today. especially on an exciting topic such as the one that is the matrix topic, if I can say that, narratives of change, reimagining English language and literature as a mirror of cultural and intellectual transformation in NEP 2020 and Viksit Bharat 2047. However, I have chosen to talk on something a little more specific within the larger area, that is transforming English language education, curriculum and pedagogical innovations for a multidisciplinary future. Now, while talking about how we might go about transforming English language education, we will be referring to the important documents, the National Education Policy 2020 and the Viksit Bharat Vision Statement 2047. It's a very large area, and I sometimes feel that I'm kind of lost in it, but hopefully it's not um, a permanent state. I mean, because I have a kind of a passion for language, the role of language in education. So before I go on to specifics, I would like to take a kind of a bird's excuse me, a bird's eye view of the role of policy and vision statements, their significance and relevance. That's what indeed NEP 2020 and Viksit Bharat 47 are. They are as abstract formulations. They are not directly concerned with contextual details, and that is the reason why these documents can, in fact, the NEP 2020 is more articulated, whereas the vision statement of Viksit Bharat 2047 is still evolving. And as vision statements go, they are more abstract. They are a kind of philosophy of the overall vision. That is how we might want to go forward. Incidentally, I'm sure in the course of the last few days, the discussion must have taken place regarding the significance of the year 2047. Why is that? Excuse me. Can anybody give a quick response, maybe? Why is the year 47 relevant? Yes, Dr. Mushahabi. You need to, yeah, unmute.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, it's because 1947.
Sorry, the line was not very clear. Can you say that again? Anyway, I think I can anticipate. I thought I heard you say 1947. So it's actually going to be 100 years of independent India. That is indeed a milestone point where we have to take stock of how things have been and how things need to be, how we need to move. There's also another, excuse me, I'll just mute myself a bit, clear my throat. There's also another reason why we can attribute the significance of 2047 to the way it has been envisioned. That is, the generation from today will be, a child born today will be 22 years old. I've never been good at maths, but I think I can do that. So that is a 22-year-old young person. And so it is a kind of a generation envisioned in the statement where we are looking at young people taking the nation forward. And that is, I thought, something interesting to talk about. Now, of course, they do not provide, neither the policy NEP 2020 nor the vision statements provide uh, any specifics of implementation, because one can see why that is so. Because for a country as vast as India, we cannot envision the diversity that will be characteristic of the entire country. So that is one issue. And also the other equally important or perhaps more important issue is in terms of the conceptual uh, perspective, that is the overall general perspective, the bird's eye view perspective of the situations should not be lost. And so they are formulated in the way they have been. Now, of course, the implementation of policy and vision would need to refer to the relevant contextual factors. And I think, as far as particularly the NEP 2020 is concerned, we can see that going on at different levels, at the state government level as well as at the central government level, where we can see how the state curricular framework uh, systems have been set up. For example, Assam has its own state curricular framework, which is based on the National Curricular Framework (NCF) that was put forward by the NCERT. So that is an example of a more concrete manifestation of the more abstract formulation of the principles of education as enshrined in the NEP 2020. So with these general comments, I would like, in fact, I have already referred to the significance and relevance of these two important documents, but I will have a few more things to say about them in a general way before I move to more specifics related to what I want to talk about today. That is, it will come at its own time. Please bear with me. But first, I want to take up the NEP 2020 and language education issues, how these are dealt with within the context of NEP 2020. So the NEP 2020 is very clear about how it sees the promotion of Indian languages, art, and culture being done. It takes note of multilingualism in India, and it makes it very clear that multilingualism is not to be thought of as a handicap, but rather as an asset, because that reality, the multilingual reality of India, is related to another aspect of India that we are proud of, and that is the diversity, the
और सर
mosaic.
अगर ऑब्जेक्टिव पास करना है तो टेस्ट वेस्ट सब हम जोड़ने लगेंगे तो आधे बच्चे पास ही नहीं होंगे.
Okay. Uh,
So sorry
right.
for that. I request the
No,
participants to please keep your mic muted. Thank you.
that's all right. Yeah, thanks. So the diversity of India, in fact, is directly related to the multilingual reality of India. And however, even though the multilingual reality of India is a mirror of the diversity of culture and existence of communities in India, there are issues that require urgent attention, and the NEP has talked about it, like the smaller languages issue, the endangerment and loss that are currently resulting from the bigger languages getting a more prominent attention. But then that attention apparently is not enough, because even the 22 eighth schedule languages are facing challenges, and the NEP 2020 has offered some ideas on how we might face the educational pedagogic challenges that are being faced even by the so-called larger languages. And some of the provisions suggested are teacher education provisions. However, there are interesting comments which can be generally summarized as teacher education provisions being content centered, and I will hope to show how that is the case a little later. There's also a very specific remark about the scarcity of language teachers in India. If one looks at NEP 2020, chapter 22.6, here is the quote that from that section. Sorry, it is 22.7, the seventh section of chapter 22. There have been, it has been pointed out about the severe scarcity of language teachers which in India that are skilled. So despite measures being taken, and language teaching too, the process of teaching languages must be improved to make it more experiential rather than imposing some rule governed perspectives on the learners. They have to experience language rather than experience the rules and particular forms of language in isolation as items to memorize through rote. Incidentally, you must have noticed that rote learning has also been pointed out as something that we need to address if we want to go ahead with a successful language education uh, um, program for our languages. The ability to focus on and converse and interact in the language is to be upheld, and not just the literature, vocabulary, grammar of the language. In fact, much of the language teaching in India at present is focused on isolated items of vocabulary, grammar, etc., being taught. And in literature, teaching has some of its issues, which I will not be able to go into in detail. But let me say that even as a specific subject specialism, the teaching of literature is more content biased than skills biased, which is necessary a perspective for learners to be able to learn the language underlying or language in which the literature has been created, be it English, be it Assamese, or be it Tamil, whatever the language is in which the literature has been created. The students have to be able to focus on the resources of the language in a in a in a connected way, not in an isolated way. And one of the ways in which the suggestion has been made is to use language more extensively for conversation and for teaching learning. So that is one of the important sections I thought that the NEP 2020 makes reference to. Now, coming to Viksit Bharat, by the way, before I end my general comments on the NEP 2020, which is necessarily very cursory, but I have actually focused on the issues that are relevant for my talk. So, one issue that has got my attention is that while multilingualism as such has been referred to in the NEP 2020 and talked about extensively, there is no reference to the way multilingualism is to be implemented in the classroom. The pedagogical dimension of teaching more than one language at the classroom or handling teaching through more than one language in the classroom still eludes us. And we need to look at models elsewhere in the world where, for example, for Spanish, English, they use dual language programs. And even, of course, the hopeful sign is that for as far as NEP 2020 implementation is concerned, we know that at least at the elementary level, the early literacy efforts are being given a multilingual turn. And I'm happy to note that the agencies concerned, the government agencies as well as the non-governmental agencies concerned, are exercised to make sure that in addition to the standard language, par excellence, that is English, or the regional standard like English, Assamese or Bangla or Tamil or Odia, the regional home languages are to be included, and efforts are being made to play around with how to introduce those languages as vehicles for education along with the others, that is the more prominent languages or more resourced languages. The word resource here is significant because most of the languages are under-resourced, and certainly the home languages that the NEP 2020 is very keen to bring aboard the education scenario are very under-resourced, and that is indeed a challenge. So from there, we move to Viksit Bharat 47, which I have found primarily concerned with economic and strategic targets, and knowledge-based economy and so on. And how to go about achieve them is something that has to be worked out. And part of how we can work out the ways in which we can achieve a strong economy by the stated year is when we take the civilizational traditions of India as strategic assets for the global role that the current government of India is focusing on getting India to the point of. That is, India, as we know, has thousands of years of civilization, and particularly the heritage embedded in traditional knowledge are to be considered as strategic assets. Assets are something that we can use as capital to project ourselves forward, to leap forward. So how does that work in concrete terms? These are not worked out yet, and I don't expect a vision document, as I said earlier, to spell out the specifics. That will be left to the strategic objectives formulation stage, and also the policy support that will be accompanying the strategic objective formulations. But it is well known that there is a focus on traditional knowledge coming to us through the vehicle of Sanskrit. And this is the point where I say briefly because I can't have the luxury of talking about Sanskrit in detail as I would have loved to, because of the topic at hand, a little more attention today. But I think I would still be able to make my point when I say that over the years, over the hundreds and thousands of years that Sanskrit has served as the lingua franca of India, there has evolved a staggering body of knowledge in different branches of knowledge, from literature to medicine to ecology to mathematics and so on. And the saddest part is that we are losing hold on the language that has the power to unlock the treasure embedded there. Why I say that as important is that translations are certainly possible, and there are many translations available of the important texts in Sanskrit. But if I can quote what Peter Scharf, a Sanskritist from Brown University, is saying, and that was news to me, even though I have been studying Sanskrit since school, that the resources, the materials that are present in the form of manuscripts in Sanskrit are much more than the manuscripts and resources of Latin and Greek combined. And many manuscripts are still lying without being decoded, without being edited and translated and so on. So we have to develop the capacity to read the text in the original. And I'll give you an indication of how important the approach is for language teachers, because Panini, the grammarian who 2,500 years ago wrote an astounding grammar called Ashtatyayi, continues to be relevant for linguists, although I will not say that there is much for language teachers as such to take away from the model of Panini, for reasons that it is a rule-based grammar rather than a pedagogy-based grammar, because it sought to standardize the language in a way that was important for the enunciation of the of the Vedic mantras. The purity of the mantras was very important to preserve if the results were not to be corrupted, then the right from articulation to meaning to through grammar, everything has to be very accurate. And that search for accuracy led them to discoveries in phonetics, in grammar, in lexicography, in semantics and pragmatics. These are some of the branches of linguistics, which unfortunately we know very little about, and our curricula are not able to incorporate much, uh, integrate them with the vision that we are seeing for taking India forward. That, I think, is something we all need to work on. The first thing is realization of the potential, and once we realize that there is a potential and need there, we can work on that. So the pedagogy of Sanskrit is very well known, like the among the Sanskritists, that is, and I'm sometimes saddened by the fact that so much of knowledge is contained within one body of scholars and not percolating to others. I'll give you a small example of how uh, how we can uh, utilize or um, channelize some of the insights of Sanskrit into our present day discourses. So there is a shloka called, I don't have this shloka here with me. Maybe I can, if you can bear with me, I'll just try to bring it up in a short bit. Uh, okay. Uh, are you able to see the screen right now?
Yes, sir. The screen is visible. We are in the sixth slide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There's something else I needed to show. I guess I'll have to discontinue this one and then go to that, or can I show it simultaneously?
Sir, I think you can click on the right and then maybe scroll it down. Sir, it's visible.
There is a Sanskrit shloka which says, Padachedaha padarthoktihi vigraho vakya yojana Akshepeshu samadhanam vyakhyanam panchalakshanam. So it is said that when we are doing a text, we need to be able to carry out these five things. That is, we need to do the word breaks, that is padachedaha. We have to be able to break a bigger word, a complex word, into its components. We should be able to specify the meanings of the components. We should be able to do the compounds. As you know, perhaps that Sanskrit is a very compounding language. There was a very famous statement by a scholar who said, gave an example, who said, when he said, uh, a father was worried that his son might have met with an accident. But he was so relieved to find that his child was well. And instead of saying, I'm, thank God my son is, or my child is alive, he said, thank God I am alive, childed. Uh, so that is, Jivita Santanoham. I am alive, childed. You can see that it has been created into an adjective uh, of the predicative type. I am alive, childed. I am happy. So that kind of compound abounds in Sanskrit and also in the Indian languages. So this is an issue which we can think about as relevant for our new vision of language education. So that is Vigraha, that is the third point. Then fourth is Vakya Yojana, how the sentences come together. If you take John Keats says, uh, uh, season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. So mellow fruitfulness is an abstract noun, and the season is envisioned as an abstraction. So that kind of perspective is relevant for looking at even English literature, I would argue, and not to mention T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Those of you who are familiar with it will remember that Prufrock represents the modern uncertain man. He is very unable to take a right decision, so he loses his beloved because of his hesitation. And so if we bring the framework of heroes, there's a categorization of heroes in Sanskrit literature, and if that is compared with the Western way of looking at the typology of heroes, it could give us some interesting perspectives. So this is the fourth one, Vakya Yojana. And the fifth point is Akshepeshu Samadhanam. That is, when I have some doubt, Akshep means doubt or objection, then finding a solution to them. That is the function of Vyakhyanam. That is, explanation has these five characteristics according to a pedagogy followed extensively in Sanskrit commentaries. Unfortunately, very few of us know about it, and those of us who know about it have not been given sufficient pedagogic experience in actually concretely using these pedagogic strategies for teaching our own literatures, or indeed English literature, not to mention Sanskrit literature. Even if we are talking of other literatures, contemporary literatures, we can see how traditional knowledge, as enshrined in the literary critical um, tradition of Sanskrit, can be an asset for India. That is, I'm just giving an example of from literature, but we can quickly transplant this idea into other subjects like maths, for example. Many of you might be aware of the zero aware of the fact that zero had its origins in India. Shunya. What is the significance of shunya? Now, shunya is in maths is very well known, but shunya is also very important for language. Like when we say one sheep and 10 sheep, so there is 10 is a plural. Well, there, that is, the number is more, that is more, 10 is more than one, but the S is missing there. So that kind of idea was originated in India, and it has got extensive uses. So that's another example of how Indian uh, traditional knowledge has been imbibed into world knowledge. And indeed, you might be aware that the Roman numeral, we talk about Roman numerals and Arabic numerals. They are actually Indian numerals, which were the Indian numeral system was borrowed and taken over by the Arabs, and from them, I think that is how the West came to know about it. So heritage as embedded in traditional knowledge can be used as strategic assets. And this is from an abstract point of view, the Viksit Bharat 47 has made the point, but we can substantiate, we can enlarge upon the idea and apply the idea to our specific cases. Now, another point about Viksit Bharat 47 is that it recognizes diversity implicitly through civilizational pluralism, but it does not articulate a language policy because it is not directly concerned with language policy. Uh, that is more the purview of the NEP 2020. So, which brings us to the point of complementary nature of the role of NEP 2020 and Viksit Bharat. So a question can be interestingly posed here, that is it possible to map NEP's concrete educational or language literature proposals onto or support the broader civilizational or cultural aspirations of Viksit Bharat 2047? So that is, if we look at NEP 2020, it's a language education policy. Language education forms a very important core of the activities or processes of activities of the overall system country. So how much of a role can NEP's suggestions be seen to take in the context of the broader vision that is enshrined in Viksit Bharat is a question that is too broad for me to tackle, but I will try to give my views on some aspects of it as we go along. So the next point is we come to the specifics that is of my talk. So that is I've said that I would be talking about how we can transform English language education, curriculum, and pedagogical interventions for a multidisciplinary future. So multidisciplinary future is something that the present context of English language education is not able to handle effectively, certainly not. And there are gaps which we can see in the loss of aspirational goals in the learners. They become disheartened because they are, even after years of study, they are not able to pick up the language in which they are receiving education, namely English. So we can look at some of the ideas behind this problem and see how we can go forward, removing some of the issues that plague us at the moment. So quickly, the Indian context of English language education has wide variation. Uh, if you go from the Northeast, where there are many uh, states where English is extensively used in education, like Nagaland or Meghalaya, whereas if you go to some other states in India, like Rajasthan, we may see a different scenario with students struggling with the use of or comprehension of English. So, and post 1991, the scenario of economic liberalization brought a different kind of urgency to the situation. There was pressure on the English language teaching establishment to deliver. Deliver means, okay, if we are learning the language, we need to be able to use it. If we can't use it in the context where I want to use it, then what is the use of learning it? So there is a concern at poor communication skills of today's of Indian graduates, and their unemployability has been focused on in the NASCOM report uh, a few years back. And I think even now the problem is continuing to receive attention. So hegemony of traditional, this is this other context. Because of the failure or lack of success of the traditional approach to deliver, there was alternative suggestions. There were alternative suggestions put forward. So competition came from corporates and private sectors. If you remember, there were call centers, medical prescription and transcription centers set up. And for manning those or for running those centers, some people had to be specifically taught through different methodologies. So English language education curricular reforms in the technology higher education institutions were happening. Like in SRM, I would be interested to know what kind of curricular framework you follow. Literature would certainly be a part of it, but I would be very surprised if it continues to have the same kind of importance as it has in a traditional university. There are the language labs, spoken English courses, and these are some of the factors that spur a move towards a different approach to teaching and learning of English. TOEFL, IELTS, which these tests also put a certain kind of urgency to the teaching learning of English. So what these new developments meant was that the existing system was not delivering. And so it does appear that the English language education is indeed at the crossroads. So what do we mean by crossroads? Crossroads is a metaphor for a decision point, a turning point, and also as an opportunity to change. So in what follows, we outline our vision of how English language education in India should transform itself. The first is to clarify the language and literature confusion. That has been one of the points where I have had a lot of grief with my literature colleagues in the department and elsewhere. Nothing personal, but we came into conflicts, administrative conflicts in terms of territorial jurisdiction in the curriculum and so on. And so I would like to clarify the confusion I think exists between language and literature. If we compare walking and dancing, walking is an everyday activity. But even though it is an everyday activity, it is a very important activity, one that we cannot do without. On the other hand, dancing is an aesthetic activity. It's a thing of beauty. We don't go to watch somebody walking, but we go to watch somebody dancing, a dance recital, for example. So literature, in that sense, is aesthetics, whereas everyday language, is like walking. So literature as aesthetics is like dancing, and that analogy would help us understand some of the other aspects that we need to take into account. So we're just introducing an idea of a clarity metric. A clarity metric can be referred to as actionable measures. That is, these can be acted upon in some way, in some area. They serve to bring greater clarity. They give a clearer picture of on hazy situations. And also, for example, uh, in our situation that I see it as, the Indian English language education crossroads situation represents the haziness which can be cleared by some of the clarity metrics we shall be talking about. The first clarity metric to talk about is the fact that to learn a language, we have to develop proficiency in it. That is the first clarity metric. So, and that is related to, if you can see the point in the bullet pointed observations, why do we learn English? Not so much to learn its literary content. I remember many students go to English major classes with the hope that their English will improve. They didn't join up to study Shakespeare or Milton or indeed Matthew Arnold's poems or Wordsworth's poetry. But they think that to learn English, one has to imbibe, one has to go use the literary content of English to be able to be proficient in it. Now, this may well be the need of some. So I'm not saying that English is not interesting or should not be studied for its own sake. English major students, for example, they know what they're doing. But by and large, for the majority of learners, the goal is to, when they learn, when they join up to learn English, they want to develop their proficiency in the language. And I think that is something we need to take account of. To learn a language is to develop proficiency in it. And so, what is language proficiency? If we want to define language proficiency, we would have to say that to use a language is to express meaning as speakers and hearers. So language is basically a meaning-making activity. We make meaning, we create meaning through language. To use language with an acceptable level of accuracy through one or more of the four skills of language. So that is one of the goals of proficiency, that is to be able to listen and understand what somebody is saying, to be able to speak in a way accurately so that my hearer or hearers can understand me, to be able to read the text so that I can get the meaning embedded in the text, and to be able to express my ideas through writing. Now, these are the four skills that are often talked about. But there's more to skills than meets the eye. Well, I will now talk about the importance of looking at skills as sub-skills. As the saying goes, the devil is in the detail. It is very easy to talk globally. Language skills, what are they? Okay, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay, but then what does listening involve? So, what kind of cognitive, linguistic activities do we do when we listen? So, these are some of the sub skills of listening. When we listen, to listen is to listen for gist. So, but sometimes we listen for detail, like some specific announcement at the station about some train arriving or leaving. And also something called scan listen. Like when somebody is saying something, you know that what he or she is saying, the overall speech is not important. Some of the aspects are important. So I'm just listening through it. Maybe as a YouTube video I'm looking at, I'm trying to decide whether I should listen to it. So I scan listen to it. We also listen to infer information, speaker's point of view. Is the person biased? Or is he neutral? Is she trying to project a certain attitude of positive nature or a negative nature? All these things are very much part of the listening protocol. We listen for texts or discourse patterns. Like whenever we look at, well, whenever we listen to something, I say, I'd like to begin by, and when I say I'd like to begin by, your flag, cognitive flag immediately goes up, and you think, okay, there's going to be something else. Secondly, I'd like to talk about, next, I'd like to talk about, finally, I would like to conclude by, and then we know that we are coming to the end of the point being made. So, what are these doing? These are uh, patterns in discourse. These are called, we call them semantic markers. There are other terms for them as well. So, we listen for language items, specific language items. If we are thinking of some kind of uh, attitude that the speaker has, then we may be looking for negative terms or pejorative terms or terms of appreciation and like certain adjectives, certain kinds of verbs. Like I will not be able to go into the details right now, but you get an idea of what I'm saying. So the sub skills of speaking similarly involve to be fluent. You know, to speak is to speak, to be fluent, to be accurate with spelling, pronunciation, words, and structure. That is, spellings means when we are talking of spellings, think of spelling pronunciation. We say many speakers of Indian English use the word, country. Why do they say country? Because they have in mind a word called count. So they think ry is simply added, and the whole word is to be, as if phonologically looked at as two items, whereas it is one. That is morphologically, as a word, it is one word. It's not two bits uh, like revelry. Revelry is a different word, but country is one, right? Revelry has two elements, revel and re, one root and a suffix. And pronunciation, accurate pronunciation, so that is related to speaking. Word and structure, like I remember once see, stress shifts. English is a stressed language, so compare, second syllable gets the stress, compare. But if you add the suffix able, it becomes comparable. The stress shifts to the first syllable. So these things are not learned in abstraction, they are learned as part of the way we listen. And so listening comprehension is an input skill to speaking proficiency. And this is just a, by the way, a remark, but that's how it is. So be appropriate. You have to be, that is, speaking according to the context. I'm not just talking of not just being grammatical, but I remember somebody, a teacher trainee, coming to our department and asking a lady colleague, "Madam, what is your condition?" Oh no, sorry. He started by saying, "Madam, are you good?" And then she said, "Good at what?" Then he realized that he was not getting further. He said, "What is your condition?" So you can see, how are you? It was not something that he knew. And when he said, "What is your condition?" is not ungrammatical, but that is an expression more we use for patients or some accident victims. What is the condition of the patient? Uh, Also, taking turns is something that many of us do not know how to do. Like we tend to monopolize the conversation, we tend to overlap with others. Overlapping is inevitable, it will happen, but I think a proper dialogue or a conversation where several people are talking, it's important to note that there are certain inherent skills we use to take turns. So turn taking is itself a very important area of speech study. Then respond and initiate. Like sometimes we do not ask questions, we just make some remarks. Oh, a cup of tea would be nice. I don't say, "Can you get me a cup of tea?" But the moment I say, a cup of tea would be nice, the person, instead of saying, "Okay, I'll get you a cup," if he or she agrees with me, "Yeah, that's right," that would not be the response I was be looking for, right? So I'm expecting some kind of action to follow in terms of getting me a cup of tea. And repair and retreat is similarly, sometimes when I make a mistake in pronunciation or grammatical error or say something that is not appropriate to the context, how do I correct myself? And then also repeating something if the first effort has not given me much result. Controlling a range of words and grammatical expressions uh, is also important. For example, if I'm talking about the weather, I should be able to have at least the required words like it's going to be cloudy, it's going to rain, and it's going to be a wet spell, and so on. So, and the be verb expression, it is going to be, and so on. So, structures that typically are required for weather talk. And using discourse markers is something that I refer to in listening, similarly for speaking. Reading, ability to decode. Decode means the ability to read and to spell out and speak out the word correctly. For example, if I say People, what do we say? So a student asked the teacher, why do you say why do you say people? Then the teacher replied, well, it should be, the student said it should be pronounced people because he was thinking of leopard, because which is again leopard, but in his pronunciation, he he would interpret EO literally. It's a kind of a spelling pronunciation according to spelling. So while reading, there is a lot of decoding of words, written letters, how they combine. I remember talking of uh, the place where I went for my postdoctoral was Lancaster. That was not a problem, but there's another place in UK called Leicester. I used to think that it was Leicester until I came to know that it was Leicester. So Leice is less and ter is ter. So it's two syllables. And whereas my spelling pronunciation urged me to make it three. So these issues haunt our comprehending ability, the ability to understand words appropriately. So recognizing words and word parts is also something that I can refer to the example like country. If you think of country as one word and not having word parts, unlike in revelry or devilry, you can see that ry is a suffix. So being able to recognize the word parts would make it able make me able to read them correctly. Skim through a text for the same reason that we might listen to something through in a skimming kind of way, or scan through something. That is, if I'm thinking of buying a book, is it good enough for me? Does it serve my purpose? I look at the blurb, I look at a few pages of the text, and before I decide to buy, I do the kind of scanning. Reading intensively for meaning. If, for example, I need to understand something about which I need to talk later in detail, I would read intensively. Whereas if I need to summarize something, I may, or go through something very quickly, then I may do so extensively because there is a lot of text to go through. So reading involves many sub-skills, and these are, again, let me repeat that the skills that I have talked about are only a few. There are more which can be added. Finally, writing. Writing involves all these things: handwriting, spelling, and punctuation. Expressing grammatical relationships at the sentence level. For example, the full stop or the capital letter express their own meanings. We know that a sentence has begun, or that a word with a capital letter, if not beginning a sentence, is probably referring to a proper noun. Expressing relationships between parts of a written text via cohesive devices. Like if I'm writing something, how do I move on to the next point? How do I make the transition? Do I use moreover or but also, or and yet? You see, these three expressions are transition markers, but they cohesive. They bring cohesion among texts, but among pieces of the text, but they do different functions. Also, looking at writing as a process rather than as a product. Going into the internal stages of a writing process. For example, if you have to write something, you are all familiar with, I'm sure, the expression writer's block. When we have to say something, we do not find it as difficult as having to write it. Like today, I got a mail from a student of mine apologizing that she was not able to complete something she had undertaken to write and wanted a little more time, which I granted. I realized that the problem she was facing was genuine. So that underlines the point that writing is considered to be something difficult because we most often look at it as a product, as an indivisible whole. But we can divide the writing process into introducing an idea, developing an idea, transitioning to another idea. Like if we have some ideas, we can sequence them according to their place in the scheme of things, and we can conclude the idea. And while we say conclude the idea, so we say, how do we conclude? We say, in conclusion, then, or something like that. Or we might say, add a sentence at the end. That concludes this part of the discussion. And emphasizing a point, how do we emphasize a point? There are words for it. Right? It goes without saying that, and so on. Explaining or clarifying a point already made, like I may say in my writing, while this point has been dealt with earlier, some of you who are PhD scholars would realize that there are points which you had introduced earlier, which you need to go into detail later. If you introduce too much detail earlier, then your examiner might say too much too soon. Or if you introduce the idea later in detail, the examiner might say too less, too late. These are some of the comments I received during my PhD process, and they have stayed with me. So explaining or clarifying a point already made or anticipating an objection or contrary view. At this point, some readers might be wondering what I'm leading to, or everyone may not be in one with my idea, but if I can make the point that, and so on, to defend my point of view. So these are some of the skills that are at a subterranean level, as it were, when we talk of writing. So writing needs to be looked at a smaller, at a more subtle level. And here, let me remind you of a term that I used, an expression that I used earlier, and that is the devil is in the detail. Talking about skills as writing, listening, reading, and speaking is fine, but when it comes to talking about the sub skills, how many of us are actually aware of or able to handle these? So now I want to make the point that developing proficiency through skills or sub skills of English is only half the story, because English language proficiency development should be needs driven. Our needs have to be taken into account. What are the reasons why the learner might be learning English, or for that matter, any language that he or she might be learning? So needs may exist, but this alone may not drive proficiency development, and it doesn't, because needs should be visible and they have to be made visible. There's a saying that problems must not simply exist, but problems must be seen to exist. Think of a road with potholes. We negotiate the potholes every day. And the problem exists, problem of potholes exists, but unless somebody, the PWD, for example, or the local councillor is aware that something needs to be done, so that would be the stage where they have become visible to the persons concerned. The problem has come to be noticed by the persons concerned. So in terms of needs, so there is a difference between general English needs and English with specific English needs with English with needs specified. So general English, as far as it is concerned, stakeholders are hardly aware why they are required to study general English, except for maybe score marks as one of the papers. But English with needs specified has the stakeholders aware of the reasons why they're studying English. And so this is the situation B. So we are introducing a term called needs awareness. There are two types of needs, target needs and learning needs. I won't go into details. There are enough material you can find out on the net if you're interested. Excuse me. So, but to put it briefly, target needs are the goals. That is what the learner needs to be able to do in the target situation once the learning has happened. For example, a receptionist might want to learn how to receive people, how to welcome them, how to deal with the problems they come up with, or how to send them off as happy customers. Whereas learning needs are the roots to the goals, what the learner needs to do in order to learn. So that is an intermediate situation. Like in order to reach the goals, one has to undertake a journey of learning, you can say, and that would be the learning needs being taken into account. So some of the target needs are, I'll just leave it on the screen for a bit for you to see. There can be various. Of particular importance is the content areas. What will they be? Subjects like biology, architecture, commerce, engineering, etc. So all these factors are important for computing or determining what the learning needs of the learner are. Then we come to the third clarity metric, which is that proficiency as pedagogy driven. So proficiency development has to happen through the intervention of pedagogy. What do we mean by pedagogy? Well, it means that it is the means, language pedagogy is the means and methodology through which a language is taught. In the present context, language pedagogy is the means by which language proficiency is developed. We want to be able to use the language in speaking, in listening, and reading and writing in terms of the sub-skills relevant. So how do we do that? We do it through language pedagogy. Now, how does pedagogy actually drive proficiency? How do we develop proficiency through pedagogy? What are the ways in which pedagogy is used so that our learning, our competence in the language develops? So apart from whatever happens in the classroom, there is more to what is called pedagogy, and that is the reason why there's more to pedagogy than what actually happens in the classroom. If you look at language pedagogy, it begins with curriculum design and materials developed and adapted to take the curriculum forward. Then there is the classroom methodology, and there is the assessment to make sure that the learner has learned. And in fact, there are two kinds of assessment. One is the formative assessment, that is when the day-to-day teaching activity includes efforts by the teacher to make sure that the learner has indeed learned something. If the if the student concerned has not learned it, then the teacher would try some other technique. So that would be within the classroom assessment. The summative assessment is, of course, at the end of the year or as half-yearly exams and so on. So that is part of the evaluation. So you can see that language pedagogy involves all this, and this is not something new. This is very old, and certainly people from education would be very familiar with them. The point is, language education is something that we are concerned with, and I will come to this in a bit. Let us go to the next picture, which is the bigger picture of where language pedagogy is a part. I hope it is visible enough. Now, language pedagogy, as you can see, is shown in red. The curriculum, development, materials, methodology, and assessment. Whereas language behavior is what we are concerned with to develop through the pedagogical means. We need, for example, speaking with its sub-skills, listening with its sub-skills, reading with its sub-skills, and writing with its sub-skills. These four would each of them have, the four would have their own curricula, materials, methodology, and assessment. Right now, of course, we have everything combined. Very often it is combined because we do not have the luxury of being going to a micro level of teaching in the class. typically a bit of speaking, a bit of listening, and so on, but in the process, not much is achieved. Achieved, what am I talking about being achieved? I'm talking about the knowledge of language, knowledge of the language resources. So language, we behave in a language because we know the spelling, because we know the pronunciation, because we know the vocabulary, because we know the grammar and the discourse structure. So all this is part of the underlying knowledge of language, which is reflected in the behavior of the language. Right now, I'm able to use English because I have the knowledge of these areas. And for a learner, we need to make sure that the learner has access to all these language resources, so-called, uh, through the pedagogical means that are shown in red there, and which hopefully would be able to produce the result we are looking for, that the person is speaking fluently and accurately and is able to listen, listen with clarity. That is, speaks. I'm mixing up my verbs. Is able to speak with clarity, is listening and making discerning, has the ability to discern finer points made, reading at a level that is both satisfactory in terms of speed and accuracy, and writing in terms of both. So this is the bigger picture that this kind of completes the overall picture that I was hoping to project. Now, the reason I went into the micro level of this situation is because I think that it is very important to break free from the traditional baggage or towards a multidisciplinarist orientation. Now, why do I talk about a traditional baggage? Literature bias to English teaching needs to be acknowledged and challenged. That is, if I want to say something that is appropriate to a situation, it may not be a literary expression that I can use. Imagine somebody saying to you, my friend, I'm very miserable because I'm going through very bad days. And would it be appropriate to say, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Now, that's a poetic expression. It may be appropriate to put in context, but I think it would be more appropriate to say, don't worry, my friend, bad days are here, but they'll be gone. Tomorrow will be another day and you'll be fine. So that kind of expression requires my competence in vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, whatever you call it. It's a package deal. So literature does not expose us to the kind of variety of language that we need in the functional spectrum of the use of language, day-to-day use. Like we need a language to thank somebody. We need to disagree with one another. How do we disagree with one another? We have a very stark way of disagreeing sometimes. Like I might say, I don't agree with you. That is very rude in some ways of looking at it. I might say, my view is a little different from yours, or I beg to differ. And you can think of so many other ways that we can differ from one another. So, the literature bias to teaching of English needs to be challenged because literature itself is a consumer discipline of language. Because literature is one of the uses to which English language is put. In fact, I can generalize it to say that Assamese, if I talk of Assamese literature is one of the uses to which Assamese language is put. Assamese language is used by various indigenous groups like Boros, the Rabhas, the Dimasas, the Missings to communicate among themselves. So that is the real day-to-day use of Assamese, one of the examples. But this kind of flexibility of function cannot be envisaged within the literature-oriented teaching of English. And it's not by itself a problem. What I'm saying is too much of burden of expectation has been put on English to the point that it is expected to deliver for other consumer groups that are not able to be satisfied with what they are being given. So anthropology to chemistry through history to zoology. I have highlighted the A and Z to emphasize the fact that the disciplinary spectrum from A to Z is served by English. Or if you take Assamese, for Assamese or Tamil in higher education, if you think, or in school education, where we use the same language to teach not only the literature of the language, Assamese literature or Tamil literature, but we are talking of anthropology in Assamese and chemistry and history and zoology. Now, why is this important? Because we need to create resources in these languages, in the concerned languages, to be able to cater to the multidisciplinarist need. The needs of an anthropologist, as far as language is concerned, are not the same as the needs of a literature student. The needs of a chemistry student is not the same as the needs of a history student. Because we are talking of the discourse as different. Chemistry discourse would involve experimentation and processes and change of state and so on. Whereas history is a chronology. And you can see, like once upon a time or in the early days of his reign, so-and-so was a benevolent person, but later on he turned a tyrant and so on. So we are talking of history means, we are talking of people and places and events, whereas chemistry is about the elements and their relations and their transformations. So how can the language dealing with chemistry be the same as the language of history? Nobody is saying they are the same. But what I'm saying is we need to differentiate the pedagogy associated with the disciplines concerned. That is my point. And that is a point that has not been appreciated within the literature biased tradition of teaching English, or for that matter, I would argue for the teaching of Assamese or any of the modern Indian languages. If we look at the resources that are being created in this regard, you will have your answer. So we have to the way forward is to create a dedicated English language education professionals through capacity building measures. When I say English language education professionals, because I will not have time later on to expand on it, think of Assamese language education, think of Tamil language education. So we need to build capacity in the teachers, something that the NEP 2020 has talked about. And if we are really going to project our traditional knowledge into a vibrant discussion or discourse, then we need to have the language in order to be able to develop these discussions and discourses. The fact that we have to rely on English to be understood, and the fact that we have had such limited success with using Hindi as our official language of India is a proof in itself. And Hindi, with its huge resource base, has not been able to serve the purposes which the founding fathers served it would do, and would be able to replace English. So you have the crux of the situation. So where does the situation of the other 22 languages exist in this kind of a situation. Or for that matter, when you think of the smaller languages, home languages, which are yet, many of which are yet to be resourced in terms of scripts, in terms of vocabulary development, in terms of word books and teaching material and so on, you can see the challenge in front of us for creating not only English language professionals, we can generalize it to say we have to create dedicated language education professionals through capacity building measures. And what is a professional? I like the definition given by Penny Earl, a language education specialist, that a professional is someone who brings about change in real time. The kind of change we are thinking of in the span between 2025 and 2047 is something that will involve real-time changes, and changes, when changes happen, they need to be directed, they need to be channelized, they need to be encouraged, they need to be empowered. Otherwise, the kind of unregulated change that is happening right now after the liberalization, as many of you have noticed with some distress, I'm sure, that the children are more proficient in English than in the home language or their mother tongue. Or we are mourning the loss of our culture in our ways of life with our children, and yet we are left with no option but to continue to use English because it is the window on the world. Now that kind of situation needs to be squarely thought of, and the kind of strategies that we were talking about earlier while we were talking about the NEP 2020 multilingual education protocols being formulated, or indeed for Viksit Bharat, how we can use the heritage assets in terms of strategic assets as strategic assets. We are looking at that kind of capacity development in a channelized way. So language proficiency then has to be needs-based, and in this kind of situation, we can make sure that language proficiency is indeed needs-based by ensuring that appropriate pedagogic interventions, as I pointed out briefly in my few slides earlier, have been put in place. Like if I take the example of an analogy, all languages do not need to have the same kind of capacity built in the learners. Now, when we talk of Assamese, and I'm talking about the local situation with speakers of Rabha, one of the Tibeto-Burman languages spoken in Lower Assam, Gwalpara, and parts of Kamruk district. They want to learn their mother tongue. Rabha speakers are interested in preserving their language, which is facing endangerment. But they also want to learn English, and they also want to learn Assamese. Now, what I'm saying is there is no competition between these three languages. That is how our language policy needs to take into account what is to be termed language education policy. Our language education policies for each state need to be able to take into account the differential needs that we put on the languages concerned. So Rabha is a language of home and within community. But the moment a Rabha person comes out of his home, he needs to speak to a Boro person or a missing person or a Bengali person. So there, the lingua franca or the common language of understanding is Assamese. But English also needs to be embedded somewhere. And so uh, we have English as part of the education scenario. And that actually brings us to the multilingual situation that I talked about earlier, ensuring a effective protocol for teaching languages as we have them in the multilingual context, with the mother tongue as the base. There is an approach called MTB-MLE, some of you might be aware of, mother tongue-based multilingual education. The mother tongue is the most important language that a learner learns because that's the first language, which is used to format the brain, which formats the brain as it were. It is said by cognitivists and linguists and educational psychologists that language is learned only once. The other languages that we learn are part of the overall cognitive mechanism, and some kind of redistribution happens within our brain of the areas of language as we proceed. But the point is, if we have learned the L1 first well, then we will be able to learn the other languages well. But then the tragedy is that we are not able to ensure contexts where L1 is taught for a longer term time enough to be for the speakers to develop proficiency or reading and writing and so on. So that takes the place of, so instead of staying with the language, we have language shift in education. And very quickly we move on to from the regional language medium of instruction or the local languages medium of instruction, we move to English languages medium of instruction. And that is not very helpful for the learners developing proficiency in the mother tongue, nor is it very effective in the learning of the proficiency in the larger language, be it English, be it some major Indian language. So that is the challenge we have to encounter and find solutions to. I should also talk about, just briefly, an analogy somebody pointed out. Professor Kelkar, I think, a very respected linguist, now no more. He was our teacher in Deccan College. He said that, when you travel from home in a remote village, you walk and then you go by a bullock cart, use a bullock cart to reach the station, the bus station, take a bus, come to the big city, and then take a plane, the flight. Now, it's like the local language is like the bullock cart that one uses. It's there. Similarly, the Rabha speaker is not expecting to need to is not expecting to use Assamese or indeed Rabha, his mother tongue, for matriculation or post-graduation. So resources accordingly, we need to think of only up till the point where the speakers want their language to be taught or to be taught through. And then the resources accordingly can be planned. So just as it is absurd to think of taking off on a jet plane from the place where the person starts the journey, similarly, it is absurd to think of using the bullock cart to go to New York. So that is the idea behind language planning, each language according to its use and need as defined by the pragmatic situation. Extending the scope of pedagogic intervention. So moving from a polarized focus to a distributed focus, from the needs of a few to the needs of many more. That's the point I hope I've been able to make, that by by projecting our language education efforts towards the needs of the other disciplines, then we are making sure that the learners are accordingly supported. Literature teaching will satisfy the needs of only one group of people, but that will not be enough to serve the needs of the other subject disciplines. As we know, many of you might be aware that up till class 4 or so, students manage somehow. But after class 4 or 5, there is a bit of a problem with maths or science or content-heavy subjects when it comes to the use of language. That is, apart from English, in the regional languages, that is one big issue many students face. And that is the reason, because the language that is taught, even for English, I would say, in some cases, the language is too fragile to be able to carry the burden of the concepts and content of the other subjects. So we need to focus on the needs of many more. I'm moving towards the end. We need to support cross-curricular English language proficiency development. And again, please read this as language proficiency development, not just English language proficiency development, because language proficiency development is the responsibility of all teachers. That is a point which I would like to make very strongly. It is not just the language teachers or English language teachers have to teach language. In fact, some conscientious and duty-conscious teachers teach language of their disciplines very consciously. I'm familiar. I know many science teachers who teach their subjects in terms of the languages that are used for their subjects, but they need support. That is the point I'm trying to make. So we have to incorporate various kinds of proficiency, general English language proficiency, which is called BICS, and discipline-specific proficiency, which is called CALP. So I won't have time to illustrate the disciplinary distinctions here between BICS and CALP, but please look up BICS and CALP if you can. You will find some very interesting ideas propagated by Jim Cummins, one of the most influential language education specialists of our time. BICS is about interpersonal communicative proficiency, and CALP is communicative academic language proficiency. I may be able to shoot off my mouth in English, but when it comes to talking about linguistics or anthropology, giving a speech on it in a formal setup, I may be tongue-tied. And the reason is that my BICS may be at work, but CALP is not. That is the point. Okay, so promoting language education as a service provider discipline, whether it is, again, I'm saying instead of the E, if we substitute it with Assamese language education or Hindi language education, as a service provider discipline, like statistics. So English language education or language education is disciplinarily non-aligned. That is what I'm saying logistically and logically. That is, literary criticism is biased towards literature, but language education is not aligned to any particular subject specialism. English language education is concerned, or language education is concerned with developing language proficiency rather than giving aspects of content. And language education encompasses all three important aspects of language, that is knowledge, behavior, and pedagogy. That is the point I made in the big picture slide. So finally, this is the final slide. So giving English language education a multilingualist and multidisciplinary orientation, what is involved? And I think there lies the solution to many of the problems of language education that we face today. So if you think of language education as a multilingualist enterprise, then we need to think of resources for each language that we want to taught. And resources do not need to come in huge amounts. For smaller languages, which will have the kind of function that I alluded to in my reference to the bullock cart, there will be only the primary level resources or maybe middle school level resources that we need to focus on to start with at least. Whereas for the more developed languages or more functionally heavy languages, we need to create more resources. So, and also how to balance the different languages in a way that learners can learn well and successfully. So we have to rethink. For this, we need to rethink the stand-alone perspective for English. Somehow English departments are by themselves, but English does not happen by itself. English is led up to, some other language leads up to English. Even if for those of us who have started our formal education through English, at home we speak our home languages and we continue to do so. So there is a kind of symbiotic relationship between the languages, not just English. And in school or college or university, the same thing continues. We need to rethink that seriously. India's multilingual and multidisciplinary contexts and needs need to be taken into account. Bilingual and dual modes of approaches to teaching learning experiences or practices need to be undertaken. For example, using more than one language in the class. We already do that, but we need to validate that. And recent work by Ophelia Garcia, if you're interested, you can look up some translanguaging resources where students come to class speaking their home language. Slowly, when they get exposure to the language of their class, they transition to the bigger, more widely used language. That is a natural process. We need to give them the space. We need to give them the encouragement to do so. How much of practice opportunity do students have? Have we ever wondered how students communicate among themselves, students from different groups, successfully in the playground, but they are tongue-tied in the classroom because of the nature of the formal language we use? Making a formal provision for inclusion of the translanguaging practices in the overall pedagogy. Thereby, we should provide bilingual bridging support to learners, encourage their self-learning efforts as anticipated by constructivism. Jean Piaget's constructivism is a theory which says that learners construe or construct their reality. That is opposed to rote learning perspective. And to facilitate patterned leaps of learning, like mother tongue to English to mother tongue, that is something we keep doing without realizing. Now, how do all this fit in with the policy document of NEP 2020 and the vision statement of Viksit Bharat 2047? There's a big gap between the two. As you can see, one is an abstract. I said at the beginning, we have the need for some abstract formulation of our goals, but we also need some specifics. Right now, we have some missing links between the specifics of the real situation and the abstract goals that we have set for ourselves, whether in the more limited scope of the language education policy document 2020, or in terms of broader socio-economic knowledge-based vision that the Viksit Bharat 2020 endorses. So we need to work on that, and I would suggest that although it is not the solution to everything, but it will be part of the way, if we can incorporate the skills as specific sub-skills, and we are able to take a pedagogically oriented approach to teaching language, If we give proficiency its value in terms of what the person needs to speak in order to get by or communicate as per the requirements of the situation, whether it's a lecture, whether it is buying something in a foreign place or in another state, and so on. So being able to use language effectively uh, and through proper communication protocols. So that is something we need to work on. But as I began preparing for the talk, I was aware that I would not be able to give you a full cut and dried picture, but I hope I have been able to give you at least some ideas to think about. And if I have done so, I would consider my effort to be successful. I thank you all for taking your time to attend this talk, and I thank the organizers, particularly Dr. Yansubeni, for making this participation of mine possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Tamali sir, for being with us today and for delivering such a wonderful session today. Your session has actually, in fact, showed us how blending innovation pedagogy with our linguistic heritage can, offer a clear vision of how the teachers can help learners to develop not just language proficiency, but also the critical skills that they need to thrive in the 21st century. We are truly inspired by your talk, and we are really grateful for your time and for your expertise. So thank you so much on behalf of the Department of Language, Culture and Society, as well as from the Department of Linguistics, Tetra College, for being with us today and for delivering your talk on the topic that you have discussed beautifully just now. So thank you so much, sir. And to the participants, if you have any questions, please you can either ask questions or you can also drop it in the chat box. So the floor is open to questions now.
Professor Tamoli, sir, a wonderful presentation. We are really blessed to have been sitting with you for almost 1.5 hours. I'm just feeling a little bit envy of Yansubeni here, who would have sat in your classes, if I'm right. So,
thank you, Dr. Ramdev.
Wonderful session. The way you have structured your, I don't even know if I can say all this, but still, the way you have structured your PPT, my God, it's, a student should be want to see here, at the same time want to listen to what the teacher says. That much of connectivity you made with your presentation and with the input which you gave. We got to learn a lot from you. I don't have any questions at all. Like, you connected it so well with the topic of the FTP's topic, where you talk about how language is very much important for Viksit Bharat and for NEP 2020. It was really like, I feel like, why is he stopping it here? Why is he not continuing the session?
You made me very happy. Thank you. I was thinking that I was getting to be a little boring and monotonous after a while.
No, but it is actually the need. This is how language has to play a vital role when we talk, because you use the word, it's not only English language. It is for it can even suit the indigenous languages, which has to be revived, which is in the process of being revived now. So
language education I call as the Cinderella of teaching,
Yes, sir, exactly.
People from the Department of Education, they often ignore, not deliberately, but somehow that tradition has not started. And I think it's time we should start proper language education protocols and instill ways of developing pedagogy. It's been done. The world is going ahead with it. African speakers, I've got some friends, you would be surprised how articulate they are. And yet Indians are not being able to do as well as they would like to do because of the methodology we are following.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I just have one request. Can you please stop sharing your screen? We just want to click a picture with you on the screen. So,
All right.
yes.
Hang on. How do I?
By then, I request the participants to be ready for question session. I'm sure we have a lot of ELT people here who would be who's done their research, who's working on it. I'm sure they'll be able to understand the nuances of what Sher has shared for almost 2 hours and 50 minutes of his presentation. So it started around 1, and it is, oh, sorry, 1 hour and it's almost 2:50 now. So thank you very much, sir, for being with us for the entire session. So our participants request you to please turn on your video, your camera, so that we can take a picture.
Ramya, madam, shall I one question I forgot to ask? Shall I ask now,
Yes, please.
sir?
Yeah.
Hello,
Go
sir.
ahead. Yeah, I can hear you.
So we really enjoyed your presentation. It is all about curriculum designing, pedagogy, and so many things, sir. Sir, I have a question because we are working on the curriculum for the next year. And how can we make, we are engineering, we are teaching for engineering students, how can we incorporate the syllabus which to make it more interesting, relevant, contemporary, and all those new AI tools and all, sir?
Well, I'm not
Your view.
sure how the AI tools would help. I have not tried them myself. I'm of a more traditionalist background, but you can surely adapt ways of incorporating AI. But what I would say is that, start with the needs. What do the engineering students need to be able to do? Behavior. How do they need to behave in speaking? How do they need to talk about an experiment, let us say, that they want to conduct at the lab? What are the ingredients? In order to do this experiment, we need to have the following items: A, B, C, D, E. Next, I'll come to the process by which we start the experiment. I first boil the X, Y, Z in the pot, and then I do this, etc. And then what kind of results do I anticipate? And so on. Okay, my hypothesis, in other words, what hypothesis did I have in mind? Did the experiment actually carry out the hypothesis, confirm the hypothesis I made, or did it disconfirm or prove my hypothesis to be wrong? If wrong, why wrong? If correct, or if I have been successful, then we we discuss a bit about that. So you can think of the structure of this. I'm not saying this is as a spoken presentation, but as a written presentation. So you can incorporate activities that would take account of the relevant, uh, learning experiences that the students need to have. Similarly, pronunciation. You can take some words uh, like uh, stability or elasticity or expansion, or I'm just random. I'm using some terms at random. So there are certain aspects of pronunciation. So you can turn it into a pronunciation teaching class, or you can think in terms of grammar by looking at how the words are, like elasticity, ity, elasticity, mobility, uh, and so on. You can encourage them to create words which have similar suffixes. So there will be this kind of teaching material, there will be testing material. So you need to go back to the pedagogical, uh, what you call the plan of curriculum development, and then basically the formulation of the curriculum in terms of the needs, then developing materials, teaching learning materials to satisfy the curricular goals, then methodology to be followed in the classroom by the teacher. Also, part of it is the teacher training, because if the teachers are not properly trained or if they're not educated, language education, they cannot function effectively as language educators. That's what I meant, that language education is not just for literature people, it's for all the subjects. As physicist, a chemist, an anthropologist, everybody needs to, or a mechanical engineer needs to have her own training, needs to be familiar with the language material that she would negotiate in the classroom. And also in the classroom, how would she take the students through the learning experience? So that will be the classroom interaction. And finally, assessment, formative and summative assessment. How would she make sure that the students have indeed learned? So these all things will be a part of the curriculum. But the central point, if I can point out, is needs, learning needs. And the learning needs will define the teaching needs and the teaching materials and the teaching methodology and the assessment. Sorry I took so long to explain the points,
Thank
but
you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
Any questions, anyone?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Poonam.
Dr. Poonam, your voice is breaking.
Sir, can you suggest Sir, will you be able to suggest few topics which should be taught to BTech students?
Topics, well, BTech, again, you have to come to the specifics. You see, the devil is in the detail. What technology are you, which particular course are you talking of? If it's
Sir, we teach all the first year BTech students.
okay.
CSE,
So
mechanical, civil, auto, BTech,
okay,
biotechnology, all.
you can do things in turn. You can talk about, take some topic which will be understood by a non-specialist at that beginning level, because it's a combined class, right? So you can't afford to be very specific, but you can be specific provided you have a text which gives a description of some experiment. Or if you want to convert it into a speaking class, you can ask a student to report, to tell orally what kind of experiment she conducted. Okay, she can she can prepare as a slide, maybe a PowerPoint or something that will help her, uh, put across what she wants to talk about. Or if you give them some kind of writing, in terms of technical vocabulary, or technical vocabulary, not so discipline specific, but some generic terms like heating, like resisting, like boiling, like melting, so, and you can give them some blank, fill in the blank kind of exercises. So these are, of course, kind of testing material, but listening is also possible. In fact, you can start with listening. That is one of the easiest ways. If you have some good YouTube video on listening, on some kind of experiment, or on some topic of mechanical engineering, don't make it too long, because attention span gets you know tired. Just if you do it for 4 minutes, in fact, would be more than sufficient, maybe even less, if the person is speaking continuously. And you can beforehand give them some questions and let them. So it's a kind of a listening comprehension exercise. You want to do sub-skill. Which sub-skill would you want to promote? I talked about intensive, extensive, listening intensively, listening extensively, listening, scan listening, and so on. So depending on that, their listening skills will develop. Similarly, you can give some kind of speaking assignment based on some material that are already there, with some variation in the experiment they are conducting, but basically giving them a kind of a framework within which they can put across their points. Reading, well, reading comprehension questions you can give. You can give summaries to do, or uh, you can remove some of the function words, like like what I said, cohesion words, or signposting words, like before or after. So you can jumble up the paragraphs and ask them to reorganize the paragraphs in a right way. That will also be a reading comprehension task. Writing, similarly, you can ask them to write about something that they are going to do, or that they have done. Depending on what you give them, they will be talking about the past or the future. So these are ways in which you can trigger their skills at each of the skills. And when you go to the sub-skill level, you will find a lot to do. You just start on it, and I'm sure AI will give you a lot of ideas. Just put your question to AI, and I'm sure it will give you a much better answer than I could possibly give you.
Thank you so much for your guidance, sir.
I'm happy if you are
But
happy.
AI wouldn't have been able to define it the way you did. Thank you so much.
You're flattering me, but I guess that's fine. Thank you.
But that's the truth, sir. The AI, I don't know, the experienced head, the experienced hands, the way you give us answers, I'm sure AI can never match that. Yes. So just saying the jumbled sentences in the way you said, where you remove the directions, remove the cohesive words or the coherent words.
Yeah.
So that detailing will not be done by AI. So
Well,
thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay. Sir, there are two questions. I don't know if we are taking most of your time, because all these days we used to close the FTP by 2:30 maximum. But today we are happy that we are learning.
I'm sorry.
There's a question. No
making it
problem, sir.
long.
We are happy on that note. There's a question for you in the chat box. That's by Ms.
Yeah.
Priyanka.
Yeah.
She says, that was a great session, sir. As chapter 22.7 suggests, students should experience the language rather than focusing on literature,
Yeah.
vocabulary, and grammar. So what are the other concepts or areas we can focus on? And do you have any specific teaching methodology in mind that we can employ in language classrooms?
Yes, that's an important comment from the NEP 2020 that the participant has mentioned. I think that is also focused on that. There is too much of grammar teaching going on in isolation. And that is not helpful, because, learning is something holistic. You see, there are several kinds of learning. One is learning information and insight, like knowing that India has this many states, knowing that such and such person is the president of India. That is information and insight learning. But what is important as far as language learning is concerned is learning how to. So, like swimming, if I explain swimming to somebody, that will not enable the person to swim. It is a hands-on experience. Similarly, with language learning, one has to be able to use the language as a skill subject. And skill is defined as something that you do through repeated action. We're not going back to Skinner in case some people are worried, but there is a factor that, until a pattern is developed in the mind, like if I give you a set of sentences, when did you arrive? What is the problem? How are you going to do it? Is it going to be easy? There are some routine patterns that we, as pattern recognizing animals, we human beings are very much pattern recognizing individuals. And in fact, it is the pattern recognition that has been responsible for the development in the AI scene today. So rules, vocabulary learning in isolation, grammar learning, all this is like information and insight learning that helps, but at a higher level of learning. When the person is already much proficient, that person is able to make use of the rule. A rule is a generalization, if you think about it. But the rule, by its own definition, is not very helpful in dealing with specific ways in which we deal with our thoughts in language. There was an example, there was a story of an Indian elephant in Germany. Suddenly, a very peaceful animal suddenly became violent and almost stamped the caretaker to death. Somebody asked what was the reason, and it turned out that the caretaker was trying to teach the elephant the rules of irregular verb inflection in German. So it is so unhelpful to learn the forms: do, did, done, go, and gone. Did, or do, what is it? Play, played, played. All those forms you remember. Many of us, in your time, of course, you probably had something different. So methodologies change. Earlier, grammar translation method was used, and even today, in many ways. Incidentally, translation is a very good way of learning, provided we can use it well. I don't have time to go into it, but translation is something that the NEP 2020 has definitely mentioned as an important thing that we do between languages, because the less resourced languages will need to develop their protocols of expressing complex thoughts if they want to become vehicles for multidisciplinary learning. Like if you want to teach some abstract concepts in a language that is used only in concrete situations, we need to translate words in that language in the particular contexts where it is required. So, okay. Now, finally, the point about methodology is that methodologies, there are many, but then, these days, it's called an eclectic method. You use anything that helps you reach the point you want to reach. So it could be direct method, it could be audio-lingual method. If you are practicing spoken English, then maybe listening is very important. Listening comprehension exercises and books and audio with listening and comprehension tests are very useful. Whereas for writing, because it's a productive skill, we need to use something different. So that's the answer I can give at the moment.
Priyanka ma'am, thank you very much for that answer, sir. Priyanka ma'am, I'm sure you would have got a very detailed answer for the question which you have asked. And there's one question. Hope probably with this we'll wind up, sir. There's one question from Ms. Vidya. The question reads as, good afternoon, sir. I have a question. I, being a teacher in a paramed background, it is the Allied Health Sciences, the NEP, and from the forthcoming year, we are to follow the National Commission for Allied and Healthcare Profession syllabus. What is your advice in correlating the two?
Correlating the two meaning?
NEP 2020 and the National Commission for Allied and Healthcare Profession. Especially in terms of language.
Yeah,
because she's
so
a language
we are moving into the same area of multidisciplinarity. See, health sciences have their own terms, right? So NEP talks about different, diversity is welcomed. Multilingualism is welcomed. Multidisciplinarity is welcomed. So accordingly, what you should do is recast the syllabus or curriculum, unless you have already got a model curriculum which you can tweak to serve your own needs better. You can do modifications in a way that will cater to the needs of your students, health care students. I mean, again, it will come to, you see, I have to say that NEP 2020 will not give you specifics because it's a policy document. I said in my talk that multilingualism is very much celebrated, but multilingual education is not being much discussed because I think in their wisdom, they have left it to the formulators of education, working with language specialists and discipline specialists to work out the specifics of the requirement. So as in your case, you will have to work out the specifics of the content of the curriculum with the needs of your learners in view. And those needs are spread all across the language content divide. You know, the big picture thing I talked about. So which let me put it in a simpler way. You need to get your curriculum together in a way that your learners can behave in an appropriate way in the healthcare science area, in terms of speaking, in terms of reading, listening, and writing, including the sub-skills that are relevant for it. For example, writing a prescription, or being able to decode the information given in a label, medical label. You know, there are such specific material that you will find which you can identify and integrate into your syllabus. NEP 22 is a policy document, as I said. You know, it's a general abstract formulation. Specifics have to be worked out. If you have some linguists or language professionals around you, you can try doing that, I think. Or get in touch with some other healthcare science colleagues from across the country, just because I'm sure you might be thinking right now that you are facing the problem, but they're also facing the problem. So once we join hands, I think we'll get better results.
Thank you, sir, for that reply. And she has said, thank you, sir, for emphasizing the need and specific formulation of the syllabus. Okay. So thank you very much, sir, for this session of yours. In fact, you have given...
Sorry, your voice...
I'm on mute, I'm sorry. Okay. So we are really blessed to have you for an entire half-a-day session. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us, both Department of Linguistics, Tetso College, Dimapur, Nagaland, and Department of Language, Culture and Society, SRM Institute of Science and Technology. We are really privileged to have had you through the entire session, and we look forward for more enlightening sessions. I'm sure after this, many of the participants will be asking your mail ID and number. Hopefully, I can share that with them also.
I'm happy if I have at least been able to modulate some of the thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you once again.
Welcome.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye, sir.
Bye. So,
Participants, thank you very much. We can join again at 4, around 4:20 we'll join. Yansubeni ma'am has posted the feedback form for this session. It is there in the chat box. Kindly fill that feedback form and let's all join together for 4:30 session. Probably by 7:30 or 7:45, the sessions might get over today. Kindly plan your evening accordingly. I have posted one I'm seeking for information, and the same is there in the WhatsApp group for you. Kindly revert to that message of yours, which I've tagged even now. I am not able to find the names of 2 people, so kindly help me with that. Okay. Thank you all very much. Sir, thank you again. Thank you once again on behalf of all of us.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I posted the other one. Wait, ma'am. Wait. Don't end the meeting yet.